Hello everybody and welcome to this edition of Inside Insurance. My name is Jean Rea. I'm a consulting partner here at KPMG and I'm delighted to be your host for the series. Today we're going to have a special focus on the EU AI Act, and to do that I'm delighted to be joined by Sean Redmond. Sean is a director in KPMG and he leads our AI risk and regulatory team. He advises clients across a wide range of AI risk and compliance areas, including governance, regulatory and compliance, risk management, AI security, as well as AI development and deployment as well. He has helped a number of clients to understand the EU AI Act, and he's also helped a number of large financial institutions with their EU AI Act compliance. And I suppose we're hoping that Sean can share some of those insights with us today. And he's also presented at a number of our insurance sector events as well as Society of Actuaries events as well. So I suppose, Sean, it's a huge topic at the moment, very topical, and I suppose we might just start, just by setting the scene a little bit in terms of the Act, what it's about, what it's intending to achieve, and so on.
Yeah. Well, firstly, thanks for having me on the podcast, Jean. It's great to be here today, and I suppose we've been having this conversation over the last probably 12, 18 months, so good to, I suppose, share what we've learned over that time period with a broader group. So the EU AI Act, I think there's good awareness in the market of what it actually is, but if I was to summarise it really quickly, it's a landmark piece of legislation which really focuses on regulating the outcome of AI systems rather than actual AI systems themselves. So kind of protecting fundamental human rights, think of it kind of like consumer protection type of legislation. With that in mind, it's very much based on different risk types. So there's 4 in total. There is unacceptable prohibited risk. So there are AI use cases that will be around social scoring, using biometrics, probably not very applicable to the sector we're talking around today, but they're prohibited, so they can't be used within the EU. The next is high risk, which focuses, I suppose, on, for this sector specifically, in and around life and health is called out within that. Specifically around risk assessments or pricing. And with high risk use cases, they are allowed, but they do call for specific obligations. And I'll talk about them now in a second. And then the other 2 risk categories are, I suppose, limited and minimal risk. And they have a lower set of obligations. Use cases in them, think kind of chatbots, spam filters, stuff like that. But for this audience, for the insurance sector, in terms of life and health and high risk, you can deploy AI within those areas, but it does call for specific obligations in terms of, like, you need to perform risk assessments of the actual AI use case, pre-deployment and post-deployment. Data governance is going to be a huge aspect of that as well, in terms of, if we think around how these models work, they feed off of data, the better the data, the quality, etc., the better the outcomes are going to be. So data governance is going to be important. This is a new technology as well. I suppose it opens up new threat landscape. So from a cybersecurity perspective, that's going to be important. And the other 2 items that I think would be of interest in terms of what the obligations around high risk are is one around the traceability and auditability. Like, we as humans need to go back in and understand, why did that AI system make that decision? And in doing that, that's the kind of whole human in the loop piece that we as humans need to be involved within that kind of the system. So it was signed, the legislation was signed to effect in August of last year, and the first obligations actually came out of February of this year, which focus around the unacceptable risk, prohibited AI. We're not allowed to use that, so that has to be turned off. And the next thing is around AI literacy, which is actually really important when we think about it. Like, AI isn't going to be confined to like a specific component of an enterprise now. It's enterprise-wide. People are using it in their day-to-day job. Everyone has it on their mobile phone. So people need to understand what it is, what the impacts are within the organisation. And like, that could be proportionate to the level that you interact with it. But as of February last year, you need to have some level of, or demonstrate some level of AI literacy training within your organisation. So they're probably the key points around, I suppose, what the Act is and what it's trying to achieve.
So it's quite broad, right? So
it is very broad, yeah.
And I suppose you've touched on a number of areas, right? So you've kind of talked about the data quality, kind of the implementation risks, the human in the loop, and then the AI literacy. I suppose insurers are a bit of a broad church, but I suppose in terms of what you've seen more broadly, I suppose what are some of the steps now that the insurers need to start thinking about?
Yeah, so we've worked with a number of clients in terms of what they actually need to do. And I think probably one of the thing I'll probably focus on first is why is this piece of regulation a bit different to, I suppose, general regulation? Like the insurance sector is used to regulation, whereas this one's a bit different in the context that, as I said, it transcends the full enterprise. So when you think around like kind of traditional model risk management, is that appropriate in the context of, I suppose, some of the more sophisticated AI models around deep learning, etc.? Also, the coverage of the frameworks that are going to be in place to manage AI risk is much broader across, it can be everything from like your kind of CTO function all the way into kind of your kind of customer support unit. So I think that's important as well. So I think we need to have that mindset as we move into this. In terms of the steps that people need to take, this all just kind of comes down to AI governance, really, doesn't it? So how do I, within an insurance entity who have an idea around a use case, take that from an idea all the way through to POC to production, and while doing that, having compliance by design within that. So I think that's what people need to focus on within the sector, to make sure they have a clear view of that, and who are the key touch points, the stakeholders and the owners within that process. So that's probably like the broad picture in terms of having that framework, AI governance. But there's probably specific things within that I would focus on in the first instance. The first is around like, you know, your AI supply chain. Like you need to build out an inventory to understand what AI systems do we actually have at the moment. And that's stuff you would have built yourself, plus also anything you would have procured through your third party. So like what tech provider isn't saying AI enabled within their suite of products. So you need to be mindful of that. So let's build out your inventory so you at least know what you as an organization have. The next piece then, purely from a compliance perspective, you need to look at your categorization. So which of those categories does it fall into that I mentioned? Unlikely to be in the unacceptable risk, probably in the high risk, maybe minimal risk buckets. And then once you have that view, you can then kind of look at what does your existing suite of frameworks, policies, etc. look like? Do they meet the obligations that are set out in the Act? If yes, fantastic. If no, there might be a bit of remediation work to uplift that. And then you're kind of the last stage, you're into kind of monitoring. And monitoring, you may need to take a bit of a different view on it, depending on the sophistication of these models. So the traditional days of a one and done model and it stays that way is true, but there's also the more sophisticated ones that may demonstrate some level of adaptiveness or otherwise. So having the human in the loop and doing that continuous monitoring will be important as you move into the future, and I suppose embed AI. So they're the kind of key areas that we're supporting clients with at the moment, and that they would be my top tips, I would say.
And you've touched on a few kind of compliance challenges there. You mentioned the inventory and your traditional model risk ideally would have an inventory, but it may not necessarily deal with the AI-enabled, I suppose, risks. I suppose anything else from a compliance perspective that you're seeing in terms of compliance challenges as firms look to implement it?
Yeah, like it's funny, isn't it? So you have a regulation which was drafted over the course of 2 years, and then you have basically AI technology advancements, and they're somewhat racing against each other, and there's always going to be friction here as you look to, I suppose, demonstrate compliance, especially in a principle-based type of regulation. So you're going to have to make judgments as an organization to say, okay, if someone was to come in and look at this objectively, can they understand what we've done? Is it explainable, etc., etc. Another specific point I think worth mentioning as well in terms of like compliance challenges will be, you know, any friction it might have with other regulations. So if I take, for example, GDPR as an example, that would really, you know, maintain the minimum amount of data that you need to enable you to do your operations kind of contradicts what a model likes for. Like, the more you feed a model, the better the outcome. So I think clients are going to have these challenges and debates as they look to, I suppose, embed AI within various different parts of their operations.
Yeah, it's the parsimony versus the predictiveness of the model, And I suppose anything else, considerations-wise, you've seen, as I mentioned, I think you've helped some very large financial institutions, I suppose, implement. So any other insights that's worth taking away today?
Within the context of, this is probably two specific lines, but within the context of the ownership piece, so where does AI risk actually sit within an organisation is probably an important question. I don't want to go too technical into risk taxonomy, but there's too many actors and players here for just one person to own it. Like, some would argue that, does it sit within traditional model risk? I would argue probably not. Like, if you think around broader data, technology risk. So I think mapping that out and people understanding what their role is within, I suppose, the governance and oversight and deployment of AI systems throughout that life cycle, getting that right up front is probably important. And don't decouple that from the use case identification. So we've seen in some organizations that there will be one team over here which will be like, oh, we're coming up with the ideas of how we can do AI, etc. And then there's another risk team over here that are worrying about compliance, etc., etc. They need to be married together. It's the only way it's going to actually work in practice. Yeah.
A little bit like what we do with having an AI forum in place across the firm. It's quite useful to bring all the different actors, as you say, together. That was really insightful. I suppose if there's one thing you'd like the audience to take from today, or maybe a few things you'd like to take from today, I suppose, what would that be?
I think there's probably two main things that I would focus on. The first is around the AI literacy. I think you need to take it up a level, and you need to be clear within your organisation what your AI strategy is, and that can be data and AI strategy, and make that clear to the organisation so they understand the direction of travel that you're going in, and make sure that they have the appropriate tools to actually educate them in that context. And then the second most important thing that I'd focus on, and I just touched on it there, is around the AI governance and not decoupling that from the use case. So if you get that right and you embed appropriate steps around compliance within that process, you're not going to find yourself 6 months down the road in terms of a deployment and then realising, oh, that's high risk and we haven't done all these activities and now we need to, I suppose, pull the plug on something. So bring it up front load it, make sure you know what you're getting into before you kind of pursue any kind of deployment from a compliance perspective. And at the same time, this is a phase rolled out of a piece of regulation. Like, keep your eyes peeled in terms of future developments. There's constant consultations going on in terms of at a sectoral level and specifically at an insurance level as well. So we need to be mindful of that as well.
We need to be mindful of those, The recent EIOPA piece, I think, is probably what you're referencing there. Well, thanks very much for joining me today. It's been great having you, and I suppose we could talk for ages more, but limited enough to time today. And thanks for those at home joining us as well. As usual, if there's anything that particularly resonated with you today, please feel free to get in touch with Sean, myself, or your usual KPMG contact. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.